That's Julia Taylor. Julia is an opera singer living in New York City. In this clip from October, she's singing with her dear friend and collaborator Steve Max. My name is Emma Smith, and I am a science and health journalist. I found Julia a few years ago on Instagram. At the time, I was living in Oregon. I had just been diagnosed with long COVID and was incapacitated by fatigue, grief, and countless other symptoms. In a matter of months, the outdoors and journalism, the foundation of my life and career, which I dedicated the last 6 years of my life to living in Missoula, Montana, were no longer feasible. I was devastated. But Julia's honesty about living with long COVID motivated me. I began to follow her progression, and when I moved to New York City this fall, I reached out to her. Julia told me that her journey with music started early. In fact, music is in her blood.
My mom was a Broadway actress and grew up singing Cole Porter songs around the piano with her father. And my dad played piano and has always been in the church choir ever since he was a little boy. So music is in my lineage.
And from a young age, Julia wanted to follow in her mom's footsteps. She wanted to sing. As a teenager, she fell in love with opera. She decided to study voice performance in college and then got her master's. In 2018, just 2 years before the pandemic, Julia knew she was ready to move to New York City. She got an office job and worked on building her opera career on the side. She was going to friends' performances, networking, singing, and trying to get into the Metropolitan Opera.
I was constantly hustling to make ends meet. In hindsight, see myself as running on a little hamster wheel of up at 6:30 in the morning and going until 11 or midnight, and then collapsing into bed and then doing it all over again the next day and the next day and the next day and working 7 days a week.
When the pandemic hit, she kept hustling, often over Zoom. She was taking lessons from opera singers. She finally felt like she was making a name for herself. Then, in spring of 2022, everything shifted.
I was preparing for a really big competition. I was in one of my last voice lessons before the competition, and something just felt a little bit off. My voice wasn't as flexible as it normally was. Felt like a little bit of drip in the back of my throat.
Julia wondered if she might be getting sick.
I said, "Oh, I'll just test to be sure that it's not, to rule it out." And that second line for COVID turned red so fast. I was completely shocked. And sure enough, in the wee hours that morning, I sat out of bed, soaked in sweat. I had fever, coughing, just that full body pain when your skin hurts and your muscles hurt and everything hurts. I had sores in my mouth. It was so painful. I was just drinking ice water to try to cool my mouth down.
She was sick for 10 days, but started to feel better. She figured she'd recovered and even went to the competition in California. It didn't go as well as she'd hoped. When she got back to New York City, she worked 1 day in the office. Then, overnight, things got worse.
I woke up. I felt this intense pain in my chest, and I had to go to the emergency room. Pretty much right at check-in, they suspected that it was my gallbladder. And I sort of joked with the attending, said, "I forgot I had a gallbladder."
The doctors discovered that her gallbladder was infected and full of stones. Since she had just had COVID, they were very hesitant to operate. Julia spent the next 6 weeks at home, basically on bed rest, until the removal surgery on July 11th.
It was pretty much after that surgery that things really started to take a turn. The central area across my abdomen developed this like crazy red, hot, itchy rash.
Her surgeon couldn't explain the rash. Eventually, though, it did go away. But then other awful, mysterious symptoms began. Julia's hair started falling out. She started experiencing waves of fatigue, muscle cramps, chronic pain. She could not figure out what was happening to her body, or whether it was all connected to the surgery, until one day she happened to have a telehealth appointment with her OBGYN.
She looked at my chart and sort of asked, "What happened to you this summer?" I told her the short version of the story, and she asked me if I'd ever heard of long COVID. And I said I hadn't.
Julia received her diagnosis of long COVID on October 9th, 2022, after her only COVID infection in May.
On the one hand, I was happy because I felt like I had been going through all of this crazy health stuff since May. And I was like, oh, great, I finally have an answer. But at the same time, there really wasn't an answer.
And that's because there is no treatment for long COVID. Doctors told her to take vitamins and learn to rest. Resting or pacing is something that I also had to learn. And as a former runner, backpacker, and skier, it goes against every fiber of my being. I was diagnosed with long COVID in February 2023. However, my journey was a bit different from Julia's. It took 10 doctors over the course of 3 years across 2 states for me to be diagnosed. I first tested positive for COVID on Election Day in 2020. For 12 days, I could not read, taste, or smell, and the fatigue was so profound that even just getting up to use the bathroom required rest. Eventually, I did start testing negative. Despite this, my body's energy, which used to be boundless, felt off. 3 months after my infection, I woke up feeling especially fatigued. Over the course of the year, these episodes would come and go, but I could always feel them marinating just under the surface. I saw several doctors in Missoula. They were all bewildered by my symptoms. Then, in the spring of 2022, my symptoms became so bad that I had to leave my job and move back to Oregon. Then, I was reinfected with COVID in June 2023. I did not think it could get worse, but it did. The next several months, I juggled doctor's appointments, resting, and occasionally photographing my brother's basketball games when I felt well enough. Doctors still did not know what was wrong with me. In January 2023, an article in the Washington Post by reporter Amanda Morris struck gold. Morris interviewed people living with long COVID and asked them what the chronic fatigue felt like. The words "dragging your body through wet cement" sent chills down my spine. These were the words I was searching for but could never find when doctors would ask me how I felt. I brought this information to the second neurologist I'd seen that year. He confirmed that I likely had long COVID. Like Julia, they gave me the same answer. There was nothing that they could do. I was 24.
Long COVID is this big umbrella diagnosis. We structured our clinic in such a way that when people come with symptoms, we will hear what all of those symptoms are, but pretty quickly we're starting to pivot toward, okay, well, why are you experiencing those?
That's Dr. David Putrino. He's part of a clinic that is now called the Cohen Center for Recovery from Complex Chronic Illnesses. It opened in October 2024 in New York City through Mount Sinai. It's the center where people with infection-associated chronic conditions such as long COVID and myalgic encephalomyelitis are treated. And he said they try to figure out what's at the root of people's symptoms so they can improve.
You can experience fatigue because you have chronic inflammation. Someone may be experiencing fatigue as a result of autoimmunity, and they may need powerful medications to help them out of that fatigue, and they may need those medications for a long period of time, if not for the rest of their life. And so these are the things that we're trying to navigate and understand.
Putrino says there are many performers, singers, and athletes trying to get help at the clinic. Because their work often requires such physical, emotional, and cognitive strain, long COVID can have a massive impact. He's also noticed that they are more likely to keep their condition a secret because of the stigma surrounding having an unpredictable illness with no cure. Roughly 6% of people who get COVID develop long COVID symptoms. That's according to the World Health Organization, and it's estimated that over 400 million people worldwide have it. The disease is a chameleon. There are more than 200 documented symptoms. The most common ones are fluctuating fatigue, brain fog or difficulty thinking, shortness of breath, impaired sleep, and chronic pain. Currently, there are no FDA-approved treatments. However, there are clinical trials underway and off-label medications are sometimes prescribed. Long COVID had a massive impact on Julia's life. She was stuck in bed and sick for months. She had to transition to doing her office job remotely at home, but she did not want to quit singing.
I was trying to keep singing in my life, but the fatigue was so bad. And it's not just like tired fatigue, like, oh, I need a nap. It's like after you do a really hard workout and all of your muscles hurt. It was like that after singing, and it would last for like 2 or 3 days, where it would hurt to get up and go to the bathroom. It would hurt to try to like wash a dish after eating. It would hurt to take a shower, and the heat in the shower would raise my heart rate to one of those tachycardia episodes where I felt like I was, having that physical version of a panic attack. I was basically killing myself to try to keep singing.
One day, Julia sang in a church service in the morning and a concert in the afternoon. The fatigue from that day made it hard for her to take care of herself for a week.
It was at that point where I kind of had to take a hard look in the mirror and say that, like, I don't think I can sustain doing this anymore. Just physically. I don't think I can keep up the facade of normalcy. I don't think I can keep, killing myself to stay in this business anymore. As much as it's an integral part of who I am. Looking around my apartment when I was at that point in my illness, everything that I owned in my apartment, all of my stuff was about singing, and performing. My little like rack of earrings, half of them were worn on stage.
She ended up putting a lot of these belongings into storage, and for her health, she stopped singing. She soon realized that something had to change. She had a friend who received care at Mount Sinai's clinic, so she emailed and scheduled an appointment. Eventually, she found a clinical trial testing HIV antiviral drugs for treating long COVID. This treatment allowed her to improve gradually over the course of 2 years. And last month, she sang for 30 minutes with a collaborator, for the first time since her long COVID diagnosis in 2022.
It felt amazing. It felt like I had sort of a glimpse at my previous self, but with a better understanding of where I'm at with my long COVID.
Julia is not fully recovered, but she believes it is possible. In her free time, she is making social media videos to help raise awareness about long COVID. And she's focused on slowly bringing singing and performing back into her life, just as I am focused on journalism despite setbacks with my own health. After 2 years of progress, thanks to off-label medication, I was reinfected with COVID. However, I am in graduate school studying science, health, and environmental journalism. And after hearing Julia's story and witnessing her tenacity, I am inspired to keep fighting. Thank you to Julia Taylor for providing me with the clips of her singing, and to David Putrino for speaking with me about long COVID. I'm Emma Smith, and thank you for listening.